Hello, my name is Yanni, and I will be talking about open source. So, what is open source? In production and development, open source is a philosophy or a methodology that promotes free redistribution and access to products design or ideas and implementation details. So, the open source software is software with source code that anyone can inspect, modify, and enhance. Source code is the part of software that most computer users don't ever see. It's the code computer programmers can manipulate to change how a piece of software, a program, or application works. And programmers who have access to computer program source code can improve that program by adding features to it or fixing parts that don't always work correctly. So, what's the difference between open source versus other types of sources of software? For example, closed source. Some software have source code that only the person, team, or organization who created it and maintains exclusive control over it can modify. People call this kind of software proprietary or closed source software. Uh, so this is because only the original authors of the software can legally copy, inspect, and alter that software. And in order to use proprietary software, computer users must agree that they will not do anything with the software that the software's authors have not expressly permitted. For Microsoft Office and Adobe Photoshop are examples of proprietary softwares. Open source software is different. Um, its authors make its source code available to others who would like to view that code, copy it, learn from it, alter it, or share it. Uh, LibreOffice and the GNU image manipulation program are examples of open source software for you. Because as they do with proprietary software, users must accept the terms and license when they use open source software, but the legal terms of open source licenses differ dramatically from those of proprietary licenses. And that's because open source licenses affect the way people can use, study, modify, and distribute software. And in general, open source licenses grant computer users permission to use open source software for any purpose they wish. So what's the criteria for open source? Uh, so the first one is free redistribution. The license should not restrict any party from selling or giving away the software as a component of an aggregate software distribution containing programs for several different sources. The license should not require royalty or other fee for such sale either. And the reason behind this is because by constraining the license to require free redistribution, it eliminates the temptation for licensors to throw away many long-term gains to make short-term gains. And if that didn't happen, there would be lots of pressure for cooperators to defect. Another criteria is source code. So the program must include source code, and what it means is it must allow distribution in source code as well as compiled form. Where some form of a product is not distributed with source code, there must be a publicized means of obtaining the source code for no more than a reasonable reproduction cost, preferably downloading via the internet without a charge. So the source code must be the preferred form in which a programmer would modify the program, and that's because there needs to be an access to unobfuscated source code because you can't involve programs without modifying them. And then and since our purpose today is to make evolution easy, we that modification is required to be made. So next, derived works is another criteria. So the license must allow modifications in derived works and must allow them to be distributed under the same terms as the license of the original software. That's because the mere ability to read source isn't enough to support independent peer review and rapid uh, evolutionary selection. For rapid evolution to happen, people need to be able to experiment with and redistribute notification. Next, the integrity of the author's source code. The license may restrict source code from being distributed in modified form only if the license allows the distribution of patch files with the source code for the purpose of modifying the program at build time. The license must also explicitly permit distribution of software built from modified source code, and that it may also require derived works to carry a different name or version number from the original software. The reason of this is because encouraging lots of improvement is a good thing, but users have a right to know who is responsible for the software they're using, and authors and maintainers have a reciprocal right to know what they're being asked to support and protect their reputations. Another criteria is no discrimination against persons or groups. The license must not discriminate against any person, group, or personnel in any way. So, in order to get the maximum benefit from the process of open source and the maximum diversity of persons and groups should be equally eligible to contribute to open source. Therefore, any, it is forbidden any open source license from locking anybody out of the process. Next, no discrimination against fields of endeavor. So the license must not restrict anyone from making use of the program in a specific field or in field of endeavor. For example, it may not restrict the program from being used in a business or from being used for genetic research. The reason again, the major intention of this clause is to prohibit license traps that prevent open source from being used commercially. We want commercial users to join the open source community and not feel excluded from it. So next is the distributions license. The rights attached to the program must apply to all to whom the program is redistributed without the need for execution of any additional license by those parties. Rationale behind this is because this clause is intended to forbid closing up software by indirect means, such as requiring a non-disclosure agreement. Last criteria is that the license must not restrict other software. The license must not place restrictions on other software that is distributed along with the licensed software. For example, the license must not insist that all other programs distributed on the same medium must be open source software, because distributors of open source software have the right to make their own choices about their own software. The history behind the open source. So the concept of free sharing of technological information existed long before computers. And similar to open standards, researchers with access to Advanced Research Projects Agency Network use the process called request for comments, and that helped to develop telecommunication network protocols, which led to the birth of the internet in 1969. But the term of open source was adopted by a group of people held at Palo Alto, California, and it was the Open Source Committee organized in April 1998 by the technology publisher Tim O'Reilly. So how does open source work? So as the figure displays how the source code is freely available to the public and how they can make improvements and adjustments, ending up with a better source code for everyone to share. In this way, initial users also become producers, thus becoming producers of the content just depicted in the picture. As a developer creates a compliant program source code, which goes to the next developer, and they improve the source code, and so on. And the outcome is the best value, the best possible and vastly improved source code uh, created. So the advantages of open source. So some of the advantages are the availability of source code. It does not depend on a vendor. Uh, can can choose additional support. You can fix bugs and adapt to changing requirements as well as technology. The quality and customizability in open source is much better than other sources of software. And last, it costs much less than proprietary counterparts. Some of the disadvantages that open source has is it's not generally straightforward to use and requires a certain learning curve to use and get accustomed to. So some more of the things are incompatibility issue with software and hardware when it comes down to third-party drivers, bad codes, and some unqualified people who use it because, like we said, it's an open source. So people are always taking it and trying to create something better with it, but some are not qualified enough to do that, which causes uh, some issues and problems with the software. Software quality assurance process is widely not transparent as well. There is no financial, and last, there is no financial incentive. Some examples of open source software that are used on the daily are Mozilla Firefox, Thunderbird email client, PHP scripting language, Python programming language, database systems, and so on. So in conclusion, open source is a common platform for sharing ideas and putting them into action by developers, uh, other people who wish to improve the product software. And we are in the open source revolution where people collaborate to create and produce software technology. And based upon the key advantages of open source technology, we can finally conclude that open source deserves the increasing popularity. Thank you very much. That's it.